For today's industry insight, we're going to be discussing the idea behind the wow effect. And while it may sound like a very cute and happy thing, this has led to many studios being closed and games being cancelled. Now, the wow effect has to do with the idea of chasing after somebody else's design for your game. This can either be because it's a very, very popular game that you want to get a piece of that pie, or it's a game that you really enjoyed and you want to see if you can make it better. And you can replace WoW with Call of Duty, Fortnite, Five Nights at Freddy's, Grand Theft Auto, and pick any mega successful game, and it can be applied here. But, as we said before, the video game industry is certainly a hit-driven market. And for every major game, be it from mobile to AAA and everything in between, people will try and copy it. Some cases, they'll try to refine or iterate on that design. Other times they may just straight up try and rip it apart one-to-one and sell it as their own game. And while there is nothing wrong with being inspired by a title, chasing after somebody else's design is not good. One, it kind of makes you look like you're just ripping off somebody else. And two, it's why a lot of the MMOs crash over the last decade. Now, with World of Warcraft, at this point, you know what it is. It is a game that has achieved just peak cultural and game industry dominance. It has earned more money than probably most people will ever see in their lifetimes, and has elevated Blizzard to the point of super mega status, or whatever we want to distinguish them as. But despite that popularity and the renown it earned, that didn't stop the MMO rush of the last decade, where just about every major studio was trying to make their own take on WoW. From Ultima Online, Tabula Rasa, the EverQuest, I think they made another EverQuest or more expansions, The Matrix Online, Star Wars Online, Star Trek Online. Just pick a title that had online in its name there and you get the picture. And again, the point was, for some of these developers, they either A, wanted to directly compete with WoW. They wanted their game to overtake it. Or B, they felt that there was a big enough market for the MMO industry and just wanted a piece of that pie. And many developers and publishers were pitching their game as, we just want to earn a quarter of WoW, or a 16th. And they felt like they could do that. But that's the problem with chasing games like this, is that you're never going to achieve that same level of popularity. And to help talk about this, we're going to pull up some game footage of a title that I just recently played and see if you can guess what game it was inspired by. Alright, so this is the game To Hell with Hell that we played on the stream very recently. And I'm going to let the footage just roll while I'm talking and see if you can guess what games this was inspired by, especially when this level is over. But, like I was just saying, when it comes to chasing after somebody's game, you're not just competing with that game. You're competing with that game in whatever state it's at now, be it with days, months, or even years of post-release support and updates to it. And this is why we call this the wow effect. Because as developers kept trying to go after World of Warcraft over the last decade, WoW was still being developed. It was still growing. And what that means is that you're not just competing with World of Warcraft. You're competing with World of Warcraft year 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on with all those updates. And so I asked this on the post that I wrote as well. But here's a question for you. How does a developer spend 2 years working on a game to compete with something that's been in development for 5 or even 10 years? The answer, of course, is you can't. There's no development team in the world that can magically fast forward time to make their game 5, 10 years bigger. And that is what led to this issue of many MMOs crashing and burning. Because when people are looking at games of the genre, they're going to look at what's the big name. What's the number one MMO? Well, that's World of Warcraft, so I'm going to play that one. And again, it raises that question of, why should I play your game when the big name guy is still being developed and it's still popular? And of course, for a lot of people, they didn't check those out. And for the developers who are trying to hope for a quarter or a 16th of WoW's success, they soon discovered that they weren't getting anywhere near that, because World of Warcraft was absolute. And when we look at games today with stuff like Fortnite, or even developers being inspired by other mega successes, you have to realize what you're competing against. Even if your game is going to be in early access, that doesn't mean anything when it's being compared to the big name title that you are mentioning in your description of your game. When you say, oh, my game's inspired by The Binding of Isaac, or by Fortnite, or Battle Royale, or World of Warcraft, that denotes, or that causes some serious comparisons in the consumer market. And there are many people out there who don't like to see derivative products. Even if your game may have some legitimately unique aspects to it, if they see that your game is just ripping off of Five Nights, or you're ripping off of Mario, or whatever, they're going to immediately be turned off by it. And if you haven't guessed what this game is being inspired by, I think this scene right here will clue you in. But I want to point something out. Making your game because it's being inspired by another title, there is nothing wrong with that. If your game that you're working on is being inspired because you played Plock, Solar Jetman, and Smash TV, nothing is wrong with that. You be you. But you have to understand what is the marketing point of your game. And we've said this many times over. Your game shouldn't just be you saying, oh, it's just like X. If you want your game to succeed, you have to be able to say, my game is like X, but it has A, B, and C that's different. Because those unique features, that's going to be your marketing point. And if you don't have that, then you're making life very hard for yourself when you're trying to pitch this game to somebody else. And yes, it's of course very alluring to make a game in a well-known or very popular genre. But again, you have to understand, is there a market for the genre, or is there a market just for that one specific game? Because if it is just for that one specific game, you could be spending months or years working on a title that will never catch up. But let's head back to full screen to wrap up today's industry insight. At the end of the day, as anyone who's done game design will tell you, ideas don't mean as much as implementation. We can sit here all day long coming up with crazy ideas, but until you actually start putting something to code and getting a prototype going, it's anybody's game. And for a lot of developers out there, again, most people are working within their own respective circles. If you're in Canada, you don't exactly know what a game developer in South Africa is doing, or in Japan. And there are cases where two different developers may come up with similar looking ideas. When I spoke with the developer behind Bunker Punks, he talked about how the original version of that game was similar in some sense to Nuclear Throne. And at that level, this is not the same as the WoW effect. You can have 5 different roguelikes all be inspired by The Binding of Isaac or Nuclear Throne, but they can still have their own unique elements to it. The problem comes in when you're building your entire game's foundation off of somebody else's design. There's a huge difference in perception and tone if you say, I want to build a game that's like FTL, versus saying, I want to build the next FTL. And like we said, consumers don't like it when they see developers outright copying from somebody else. Sometimes it's just a matter of a mistake or a misconception. I've seen many Steam forums of people saying, oh, your game has a persistent system, so you're just stealing from The Binding of Isaac. Or, your game is science fiction, so you must be stealing from so-and-so. And that's not the problem. But when you look at stuff like the MMO crash and the recent Battle Royale craze, this is a case where a developer is basically saying, this game's really popular, let's just do something similar and hope that we can get, a half or a quarter of that audience. Or in some cases, you may have somebody crazy enough to say, I'm going to build a game that's going to dethrone Fortnite. And when developers try and chase after these projects, it usually ends up with a lot of people out of jobs and games just collapsing like the Hindenburg. So, to wrap things up for today, can you think of cases other than the as mentioned examples of Fortnite and World of Warcraft where a game came along to try and take out the king of a respective genre and they succeeded? Let me know in the comments below, but thank you so much for watching today's Industry Insight. If you have an idea for a topic you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Before we get to the credits, just a quick shout out to the supporters over on patreon.com/GWBycer. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check back for our regular streaming, most nights at 9:30, 10 EST, and you'll find a schedule linked down below. For a collection of my writings as well as audio casts on design, you'll find that at game-wisdom.com. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at GWBycer. If you're interested in hanging out and talking about game design topics, we have a Discord channel with the basic tier open to everybody, and that is linked down below as well. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, it is at patreon.com/GWBycer. Your support can help to keep things going and growing, and you can earn rewards such as ad-free versions of our talks, votings for our specific Let's Plays and grab bag streams, and more. But that's it for now. Thanks again for watching. I hope you come back for more great discussions on design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games.